It's a great pleasure to be back here again today and to be part of this auspicious event. I'm just calling up the panelists to join me on today, and we're going to show a presentation, and then we're going to go into the panel discussion itself. So we've got some exciting data to share with you on the initiative that we were honored to do for BPESA, which is the skills strategy. So last year, I don't know if you remember, we did the skills needs analysis, and we put together a lot of data and insights on that. Now we've gone into the skills strategy, and I'm going to hand over to Andy, who's going to do an introduction to it, and then I'll take over from there for the data. Thank you, Andy, please.
Morning, everyone. It's a wonderful opportunity to be here today and share this platform with Mark and the fellow panelists. But I also just want to say that I'm not speaking for myself, really. I'm speaking on behalf of Keith Rosmarin, who unfortunately took ill at the last moment and wasn't able to attend. And this is his work and the BPESA team and the work of Genesis GBS. So just want to make that clear, and I don't profess to be able to do justice the way Keith would do. Having said that, I've had the opportunity to work alongside the strategy with another colleague of mine in the Collective X, Deirdre Sampson, as part of the advisory committee. And I'm very pleased to share the front section of this overview with you. I think, first of all, what's important is this is a strategy that's been developed by BPESA on behalf of its members, but with its members and broader stakeholder group input, and Genesis Global Business Services. It builds on the 2019 strategy, which many of you contributed to, but it's vastly different in the sense that that strategy was quite static. It did underpin the master plan, but this strategy has evolved to reflect a completely different and new world of work, and is presented in more of a framework that's adaptable and agile. And it deals with the changes that we're facing, changes that are brought on by AI, by automation, by hybrid work, digital acceleration, etc. So it really does reflect the new world of work that we're living in. It's dynamic and it adapts to rapid change, and it's got a focus really on the following: defining skills priorities, on mapping the current and future workforce demand continuously, on aligning policy, training, and funding to the real needs that you have as industry. And importantly, it aims to ensure that BPESA, and in particular the GBS sector in South Africa, continues to grow as it does, and in fact scales and accelerates that growth, and continues to compete in the global sourcing markets very effectively and inclusive and in a future-fit way. So this strategy has been informed by a tremendous amount of research, and it's based on insights that have been provided through consultation with key industry role players. It's evidence-based, and the engagement has been broad and deep. More than 60 organizations have provided input into the strategy through different means, through surveys, through focus groups, through one-on-one engagements. And through that consultative process and the gathering of those experiences and insights from the role players, collectively, the strategy has identified critical digital, managerial, and specialist skills gaps. And I know the panelists today are going to touch on those, amongst other subjects. But this sector, as we know, is growing rapidly. It's a gem in the South African economy. But the shortage of leadership and digital skills is a potential risk and a constraint to that growth. And the strategy does respond to these insights, and it puts forward a very implementable framework of action. It supports the national goal of achieving the 500,000 jobs that the sector has laid out in its master plan. But what it does require is a collaborative, coordinative, and inclusive skills ecosystem. That's critical. It isn't the job of one party, it's the collective input and outcomes of everybody's effort. Lastly, it's important to highlight the areas of focus and the contribution that you've made to emphasize that this is a strategy that needs to be embraced by the sector because it's of your creation It needs to be implemented by the sector because it's addressing your requirements. And that engagement has been broad. 48 focus group participants representing different industries, different size businesses, local and international operators from the supply and the demand side, all the different functional areas, policymakers, funders, academics, they've all contributed in different formats. And the themes that have been explored have been several. AI and digital acceleration, which we know is upon us. Funding and incentives, which we'll talk to as well in the panel discussion. The critical aspect of inclusive talent development. And then the systemic changes and policy changes that are required to create an enabling environment for the sector's growth and the development of skills to support that growth. So the closing comments before handing over to Mark are to note on behalf of Keith that this is a strategy for the entire GBS ecosystem, not just for BPESA. Collective ownership is going to be the critical success factor. So if you walk away asking yourself, what will BPESA do for you to implement the strategy, that would be the wrong approach. You need to be walking away asking what you can do to implement the strategy, enabled and supported and coordinated by BPESA. That would be the right approach and will yield the right outcomes. And everybody has a role to play. Nobody's excluded. BPESA's role reasonably can be to coordinate. It can be to orchestrate. It can be to steward the process, but it can't be to implement everything. And in the framework for implementation are clearly defined roles and responsibilities, including those of BPESA, but also including those of all the other stakeholders in this incredible ecosystem. So shared accountability is what's going to make the strategy sustainable and transformative, and it's going to enable you as a sector to achieve the growth that you aspire to and are on track to achieve through skills, solutions, and scale. And I just want to, on behalf of the many role players who've been contributing to the process or have been on the outside observing the process, to extend a huge congratulations to Keith and the BPESA team, and to Mark and to his team, and to everybody who's contributed to producing such a robust and relevant strategy for the GBS sector. Congratulations, and over to you, Mark.
Thank you, Andy. That was a great introduction and setting the scene for the presentations. As Andy mentioned, from this industry engagement, we were able to then frame up what are essentially 12 pillars or 12 focus areas for the strategy. They zone in on critical areas of skills development, but also critical areas in terms of best practice or best practice that can be adopted by the sector. And the first one is strengthening demand-led training and curriculum alignment. Very, very important that the strategy addressed demand-led skills as its first priority, because that is what keeps South Africa competitive on the global market. Followed by accelerating mid-level managerial and supervisory skills. We know that there's a shortage of that globally, so there's a need to actually fill that gap. And then advancing role-specific and vertical industry alignment. So one of the focus areas is to actually ensure that skills are developed for specific vertical industries, like financial services, retail, healthcare, and so on, again, to keep South Africa competitive and for it to move up the value chain. And then there's two areas covering AI. We know there's a lot of talk and a lot of hype about AI, so there's one pillar covering empowering the workforce with augmented AI jobs. And then the second one is covering catalyzing new job families in AI and mitigating displacement. So one is talking about augmentation, the other one is talking about new job roles and mitigating displacement from AI. And then, of course, the strategy needs ecosystem engagement and system orchestration. So there's a section that covers that in terms of how that can be done and what those action areas are. Skills intelligence is very important. So there's a need to have a skills intelligence hub where data can be consistently collected. This is a living strategy. It's going to be updated regularly. This is not just a once-off approach and then that's it. It's a done and dusted approach. It's going to be updated regularly, and for that you need skills intelligence. And then linking it to professional development, policy alignment, and curriculum reform is also important. So we've got a pillar focused on that. Funding, we're going to hear about that today from Andy, ensuring accessible, efficient, and demand-aligned funding so that the strategy can be funded not for its own needs, but also for the needs of the sector and their skills requirements. And of course, we didn't want to forget enabling access. So there's a whole section in that strategy that speaks to enabling greater access for inclusive, impact, and PWD workers. Addressing systemic barriers and policy changes, there obviously are some of those that need to be addressed in order for the strategy to succeed. So there's a section that covers that in terms of how that can be done. And then lastly, governance. So ensuring that the strategy is driven properly, there's proper governance with a project management office sitting within BPESA, and then consistent monitoring, evaluation, and learning. And then with that, we actually then came up with 3 core deliverables. So we've got the extended strategic report, which is a narrative report. It's got a lot of detail in it. Each of those 12 pillars broken down, lots of action items, 167 pages. Okay, so if you want some light reading for the weekend, then that's something you can pick up for at the end of the presentation. By the way, at the end, we are going to have a QR code where you'll be able to download that. And it covers 4 stakeholder groups: global and local operators, training and skills supply-side providers, and then BPESA and government and policy stakeholders. So it's got action items for all of those groups. Then that's been synthesized and summarized into an implementation roadmap with short-term, medium-term, long-term horizons and KPIs that have been associated with it. So that's a summarized version of it with a roadmap. Today, you're going to also get that as part of your download. There's the slides that I'm going to be showing to you are also added into that presentation. The third deliverable is the project plan itself, which has been developed, and that helps us to track the program. It's got sheets covering the strategy focus areas with cadences, quick wins, priorities, planned start and end dates, and then also allocating dependencies and responsible stakeholders for actions. All right, so I'm going to fly through some key outtakes from those 12 pillars because I want to get into the actual the panel discussion where we can hear from our panelists. So looking at the first one in terms of demand-led skilling, we've just cherry-picked 4 action items. There's lots of those in that particular section, but it speaks to the need to co-invest with blended learning models and for training for operators to have to work with training providers across technical, digital, and professional skills domains. And the whole focus of this is bridging the management and technical skills gap to strengthen operational excellence and retention. And then we have the second one, which is accelerating mid-level managerial and specialist skills. So this is all about strengthening leadership pipelines and specialist capabilities that drive productivity, innovation, and career progression. I'm not going to read through all of these. We just cherry-picked the 4 top ones. I am trying to get through so we can have enough time for our panel. But you can see that there's a lot of really interesting outtakes here in terms of implementing structured succession and leadership development programs, for example, and for training providers to establish sector-specific academies and certification pathways for specialist roles in CX, data, finance, and IT. In the third area, it covers, it enables South Africa to capture niche, high-value market segments. So this is all about vertical industry development, as I mentioned earlier on. So having that focus in terms of vertical academies, training providers, also rolling out vertical learning pathways, BPESA supporting with convening industry advisory panels to support that. It's all about focusing on that sector-specific expertise to keep South Africa competitive. And then we have the fourth area, which is covering the AI augmentation. So this is all about equipping the workforce to thrive with AI-augmented jobs, and also in that process, ensuring that ethical standards are maintained and job security is also sustained in that process. This action item also speaks to AI, but this is now covering more the new job roles that are going to be created and what action items are required to take advantage of that, but also to ensure that workers are safeguarded from displacement. So it's all about being proactive, embracing AI, but also ensuring that there are future-proofed credentials with regards to the workforce, and that the workforce is not displaced, but they can actually evolve into other roles. And then in the sixth area, it's all about ecosystem engagement. So building a unified ecosystem that maximizes collective impact, reduces duplication. There's a lot of participation required here from the industry in order for that to happen, a lot of orchestration that's required, and there are clear action items, again, across those 4 stakeholder groups that can enable that to happen and ensure that there's cohesive delivery of the strategy action items. And then we have the skills intelligence. As I mentioned earlier on, very important to have that. So one of the key action items here is that BPESA will lead the design of a national GBS skills intelligence hub that will integrate and collate all this data on the skills needs, and it will be consistently updated with the latest market insights and labor insights. And training providers, operators, government will support that with data. That's the key action items in that section. And that's going to become a hub of data and of market analysis that will help shape the future of the strategy. As I mentioned, it's a living document, it's a blueprint that will be updated regularly. In the eighth area, it's all about policy alignment and curriculum reform. So this is all about ensuring that training remains current and flexible and recognized and enabling adaptation to global trends. It's all about making sure that systemic gaps are closed and that employers share insights and demand, and training providers build recognition of prior learning and modular micro-credential pathways. And then we have focus area 9, which is all about demand-led funding. We're going to hear about that again today. So it's important that there's funding in place, not just for the needs of the strategy, but also for operators, for training providers, to ensure that we can unlock scalable and inclusive and transparent funding mechanisms that can enable the sector with equitable sector growth. And then, of course, inclusive access for impact workers, inclusive hires, people with disabilities. So there's a whole section in the strategy that focuses on that, promoting diversity, equity, social impact, integrating women, youth, and people with disabilities into the formal GBS talent pipeline, and how to do that with practical guidelines, practical action items that operators, training providers, and BPESA and government can all adopt and they can drive forward. And then addressing systemic barriers and policy changes. This section is important in terms of removing any obstacles to growth, strengthening regulatory responsiveness, but also ensuring that employers can tackle any challenges that are there with regards to skills development. So the specific action items that address that and enable the industry to address the systemic challenges, but also ensure that a more investor-friendly skills ecosystem is in place. And finally, in pillar area 12, this is about the coordination of the GBS skills strategy. So BPESA has established and will establish a project management office to drive the strategy, coordinate implementation, reporting, and performance monitoring. But it's important, as Keith mentioned, that this is not a BPESA strategy. It's an industry strategy. It needs cohesive industry approach to get behind it. And so therefore, there's action items in this part for all the stakeholders as well to support the strategy to drive it forward. Only in that way can we ensure that there's accountability, transparency, and that there's measurable performance and progress through this continuous improvement process. Okay, so I'm going to put up the QR code now, so get your cameras ready, get your phones ready. You'll be able to now download these two documents by scanning this QR code. You'll get the extended strategic report, as I mentioned, which with all the details, so 167 pages, lots of action items in there across those 12 focus areas. And then you've got the implementation roadmap, which is the synthesized view and summarized view of that. But there is a bonus in this, and that is that the slide deck I've just shown you is actually included in the implementation roadmap as well, so you'll be able to get the slides too in that download. So please go ahead and download, and then I'm just going to now start with the panel discussion. Thank you. So, Keith, I think it would be great to start with you and just look at from the perspective of funding, right? So, the strategy does have a whole section that covers that, and it speaks about funding and incentive reform. And the question I have is, what steps can BPESA take to align funders to sector outcomes?
I'm glad we dived straight into the funding.
And you know what? I'm so sorry. I should have introduced you all. My apologies. So let me first do that. I've just jumped straight into it. So Keith. See, this is Keith's replacement. Sorry, Andy. Everybody knows.
I'm Keith's proxy. Andy.
His AI version. We also have Adam Walker. Thank you very much from Concentrix who joins us. He's going to approach things from a global operator perspective and a lot of insights to share from Concentrix. Everybody knows also Lazal, who's from CareerBox, who will be here to approach things from an impact, inclusive perspective and skills development for that group. So thank you very much for joining us. And of course, we also have Judy Robinson, who everybody knows is a training and skills expert from Mazars, who joins us today. So this is our esteemed panel. So sorry about that, Andy. Please go ahead.
If I can just start with a little bit of context and
Yes.
then talk to what the strategy puts forward as mechanisms to deal with funding. So I think from a context point of view, it's really important that we acknowledge and celebrate the contribution that this sector is able to make from an economic and a social change point of view, because it's highly competitive, it's growing, it's a job creator, and South Africa has a very strong proposition. So within the South African economy, this is a very successful sector. And when we think of what will sustain that sector, in addition to constantly stimulating the demand from the sourcing markets and locally, it's the supply of talent. And when you marry up that objective to how do you achieve it with the constraints and BPESA's own objectives of being inclusive, dealing with some of the challenges that we've got of bridging the skills divide, ensuring that young people are equipped to function in a new world influenced by constant technology change, amongst which is AI. It's costly. And so I think first we have to acknowledge that developing a talent pipeline is crucial to continue the growth of a very successful sector and to enable it to accelerate and scale that. Who's going to pay and where's the money going to come from? And so there is money. Companies have money and invest in skills development. Government has money and directs it in different ways. Philanthropies invest funding into developing young people, giving them opportunities. But it's around creating a coordinated framework in which there are several shifts as well. So we experience a very similar thing in the Collective X, and that is funding doesn't flow to where demand is. Funding is typically in the legacy models flowing through processes and linked to measurement systems, and that's not yielding the outcomes that we're looking for. So one of the first changes that needs to take place is that funding needs to be redirected towards where growth and jobs and skill requirements is, and that needs to be informed by data and research. And it needs to be demand-led as far as possible. The second key element around funding is where will the funding come from? Mm-hmm. So funding can't only come from government, and neither can it only come from business, because there's a gap to fill that needs joint ownership and risk-taking. And that gap is bridging both a knowledge and critically an experience gap, and ensuring young people who've got tremendous talent are actually able to perform in the roles that the GBS sector requires them to perform and the way in which they're changing so quickly. And whether it's laying the foundation of work readiness, whether it's giving young people the experience that they lack between their foundational education and what the requirements of an employer are, or whether it's upskilling them in the leadership skills that are constantly evolving, or dealing with the changing nature of the world of work that we're in, an investment needs to be made. And so business needs to be ready to invest to close the skills gaps. It can't expect others to do it entirely for them. Government funding needs to be redirected to where it's most needed and needs to address the gaps in our education system and our skilling system and complement businesses' funding. Can't be left to business to address the gap that's got to be closed, and also the bridge that we've got to cross to get to where we need to go. And other funding from social investor funders, etc., which is much more catalytic in nature, can also be channeled into that. But funding also comes with responsibilities, and it needs to be linked to measurable outcomes. It can't just be flooded through from the supply side. And so there's a behavioral change that's required amongst all of us, and that is to use funding on a risk-based approach where it's linked to demonstrable outcomes. And all the role players here know exactly what that means, because they apply that in their own worlds of work across the continent, locally, wherever they are, and have an astute appreciation for an investment translating to a measurable outcome that lines up to the strategy, to the growth strategy and the skills strategy, not a random outcome. So one of the key shifts is that behavioral change of moving to more of an outcomes-based funding model. And so BPESA, when thinking of all, and sorry, just the last comment then is when you're looking at inclusion comes at a cost that's necessary. And we all have a burden to bear and a responsibility to bear in funding that cost, all the role players. And it's about working out how do you do that in an equitable way within the mandates of your funding and the resources that you have. So BPESA looks at funding and the strategy through 6 key lenses. The first is creating a shared funding framework. So that's a framework across public, private, and other donor funders, that everybody understands how their funding can contribute to something aligned to their mandate and to the outcomes linked to the strategy. The first thing. The second point in the strategy is that there needs to be, within the sector and orchestrated by BPESA, a funding and incentive working group. And I'll use the word incentive, so that group can have a look at what are the things that should be incentivized and make sure that they're the right things. And that needs input and collaboration from everybody. The third is to make sure that you can pilot, and it's a very innovative concept that BPESA are putting forward in the GBS strategy with everyone's thinking, and that is the funding marketplace, where funders are allowed to see what funding opportunities there are, and those needing funds are allowed or enabled to see what funds are out there linked to what types of programs and outcomes, and bring each other together. Very innovative, a sort of directory that makes the access to funds transparent, and the process then of moving towards accessing those funds transparent. The fourth thing that the strategy is very strong about, and you highlighted it earlier, is that there needs to be a systemic shift from a purely activity-based funding model to an outcome-based funding model, where industry defines those outcomes, linked to your priorities and demand. We also need, the following points is around rewarding verified skills. So these are the skills that are in demand. And where people have got skills that are transferable, they're recognized, they're credible, they have weight in terms of the quality of competence that they signal, reward that with funding, the achievement of those. Funding needs to also be directed to reward what we're all trying to achieve, which is creating that working opportunity that's sustainable, so placements and working opportunities. And funding needs to demonstrably impact the excluded people in our economy. So impact sourcing needs to be a key beneficiary of funding. And lastly, that needs to be aligned structurally and clearly by design, that all funding is linked to real measurable sector outcomes, linked to your master plan, linked to businesses' needs, linked to the stakeholders' needs. And in that context, I feel that the strategy that BPESA has put forward with input from the sector is absolutely right. It's going to be key to execute that. So those are the key elements, and there's a lot of work, but there are a lot of good working examples of how new innovative funding solutions can be established, can be adopted, and can be refined to support the requirements of the sector.
And I think the point that you made about the behavioral change is very important, and something that certainly the strategy can also drive forward in terms of that behavioral change. Often we find that funding is not utilized in the right ways. Like you say, it should be outcomes-based, but it sometimes is not. And we're going to hear, obviously, from our training and experts as we talk further. But I want to come to you, Adam, and just talk about, from the perspective of an operator, looking at concentrics and the fact that the strategy itself does look at quite a bit at AI and digital transformation. And I wanted to get your perspective in terms of the frontline perspective of an operator, what you're seeing, and how you're preparing your workforce for AI augmented roles, for AI displacement, and also for the digital transformation.
Lovely. Thank you for the question.
Yeah.
As an organization, Concentrix has been on a bit of a transformation, if you like, moving our way from traditional kind of BPO servicing into more consultancy, technical transformation services. Yeah. And that itself has opened up the gateway for AI. We've had the privilege of being able to have our own AI tool across our global sites, and that's been opened up for all of our colleagues. And we're actually actively encouraged to go in there, build our own assistants, build our own automation, actually come up with our own tooling to make our work easier. And that's been revolutionary for us.
And that AI tool is for the frontline
It's
workers?
for all staff in Concentrix,
Okay,
and we actually sell that as a service as well.
Okay.
So it's a great way to learn our own services, if you like. Coupled with that, we've been driving as part of our culture, real kind of innovation strategy. So we reward that. So every quarter we'll host an awards where we bring our game changers in that have come up with these amazing ideas using the tech tools and show how they've really kind of created revenue gains, etc., and efficiency in productivity. So that's a real big driver. But to answer the big question, which I think was about how do we approach this from a learning point of view, well, we've got a 6-month plan at the moment. We're currently rolling out a AI training program known as Next Wave. It's 6 hours worth of learning. There's 6 modules that we're doing, which is all kind of self-paced online. But it's really world-class learning, and it's all application-based. So every single time, our people are getting more and more confident and familiar with using these tools to service our customers.
Brilliant. Great. Thank you. Thanks for that input. I'm going to come to you now, Lizelle. Thank you very much for joining us today as well. And from your perspective, there was a whole section in the strategy that focuses on inclusive access, on impact sourcing, and we know that that's very close to your heart, and that's actually your career as well. You focus on that quite a lot. So I want to ask the question in terms of looking at that and looking at the fact that the skills strategy embeds impact sourcing and inclusive hiring as a growth driver in it. How can that talent pipeline be leveraged? So what are the practical steps, but also how can it be effectively leveraged and mainstreamed across the sector?
Awesome, thank you for the question. I think the GBS plan perfectly positions impact sourcing, the inclusive hiring model, into economic growth. But I think if not already in practice, we need to move very quickly from treating the impact sourcing and inclusive hiring model as a CSI or CSR approach, but really and deliberately include it into your business strategy. And the ways that we've done it and made it and has seen success is using data as part of your assessment process, using data to understand different career paths. Are you recruiting? Are you selecting the right individuals into the right paths based on those soft skills? Are you positioning individuals into the correct career pathing, even though you're practicing your impact sourcing model? How do you use impact sourcing as a enabler to your business strategy rather than this is a CSR, or people both locally and internationally associate impact sourcing with more of a charity initiative or as opposed to a deliberate business strategy. And I think if people and operators, both operators, governments, industry bodies start treating it in the form that it's evolved to, that it is a no-brainer business decision, I think that you will definitely see, because across the board, job creation is ultimately the goal.
Right.
You need the right people in the right roles, skills development programs, skills development strategy, very essential. But if you onboard an individual through the impact sourcing model with the right training programs, you will see that success through your performance, through your retention results, and that then just tells you how good your skills programs are, but also your impact sourcing strategy.
Yes, I mean, there's been documented proof about how impact sourcing workers are committed, much more committed, they're more dedicated, and they also, the attrition is lower with regards to them, because they're more, like you say, they're more retention is a big factor for them, so they actually stay in their jobs longer, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's great. And that's value, that's direct business value from that, so that's great. So Judy, I want to come to you. Thank you again for joining us. And you've been in the industry for a long time. You've a training and skills expert. The strategy spoke a lot to stackable modular learning and micro-credentialing. How do you think training providers can shift their models to deliver this flexibly whilst maintaining quality?
Thanks. Yeah, you have to be pretty innovative to do that.
Yeah.
And I think the key word is integration.
Yeah.
So it's integrating what's currently there, what's currently quality approved in terms of your qualifications, your accreditations, but then including the stackable credentials. So I'll give you an example whereby we have built out 7 emerging technology qualifications. We made a commitment to the QCTO that each one of those qualifications would always result in a minimum of 1 Microsoft certified a badge or qualification. We have also then integrated all of our training programs, modular and extended, with the SOPHIA, the Skills for the Information Age, competency role profiles. So what we've done is we realize that we are almost, I don't want to say stuck, but we realize we are in a situation where we have the traditional qualification structure for it to be recognized. But we also know that it's not agile enough and not quick enough or not relevant enough. So how do we create these opportunities for our talent to undergo a formal process, which is accepted and acknowledged and accredited for all sorts of reasons, but at the same time, there's flexibility within that to get micro-badging and micro-credentialing in both a global and both a local and international landscape. We're wanting to develop talent in South Africa that can work anywhere for anywhere in the world, and that comes through our talent being credentialed in globally certified and recognized skill sets. So the best option there, I would say, is to take what you've got, but understand it takes a collaboration with yourself, your training curricula, specialists in their field, local and global accredited institutions, whether those are professional bodies, whether those are vendors, whether they're training institutions, and you build a best fit model for your youth, for your organization, or for your client. And you do that together so that it's the role. You start with the role and you work backwards. You don't start with the training and hope it fits the role.
And I mean, that speaks to another area of the strategy, which looks at the need for curriculum design and accreditation processes to be also updated, not only just for micro-credentialing, but also for AI. We were speaking about AI just now. What changes do you think need to happen in that regard in terms of curriculum processes and updates?
I think you've got to take two streams of approach. One is the approach that you need to take now, and the other is the approach that you need to understand is going to take you 12 to 24 months.
Yeah.
So it's almost doubling up, because the existing framework is not going to change quick enough, and you can't wait for it to change. So you've got to start being innovative and taking the risk within your own business to develop not only AI content, but AI modalities of delivering training as well. So there's limitations in your formal accreditations as to the amount of time that needs to be spent on theory, for example, or as to the amount of time that has to be spent in the workplace. And those things will shift and change with AI significantly. Yeah. So the best thing I've always believed is learning in context. So put your talent in a context within which they're going to work, give them the knowledge and experience and route to competency, and ensure that all the formalities around that are in place, but don't be limited by the formalities. So the work that we do with the Collective X enables us to do that. We've now currently got almost 100 young people in the system, whereby they are getting work-integrated learning. They are being trained on certifications, qualifications. They're getting their SOPHIA badges. They're getting their Microsoft badges. They're being developed, nurtured, and mentored for specific roles, either within our organization or within our clients. And that model is working incredibly well. And the funding models that are innovative, that are coming from the likes of the Collective X, are enabling us to do that.
Good.
She summarized it beautifully.
Brilliant. I see we're just about 1 minute out. I don't know if we have more time or we... Sorry? 5. Okay, great, fantastic. Okay, for 5 more minutes, great. So let's come back then to you, Lizelle. I'd like to know more about the inclusive access. So what practical steps then can training providers and operators take to ensure that training environments are more disability responsive for people with disabilities?
I think that's to leverage off what Judy's saying. I think we need to think of the job in mind firstly, and take that, what is the individual expected to do in their current capacity, and leverage off what's the outcomes and how do we design a program that's incorporated into those outcomes. What's worked for us in the past is how do we leverage off community-based identification? How do we partner with communities in order to understand your personal challenges and then the challenges that you will experience in the role itself. Right. Using that into your training programs to create a more inclusive way of learning, development program, but also preparing you for the type of role that you're going to go into. The other approach is how do we use AI into your training and more of a blended learning to then actually give you the practical skills whilst you're in the development stage for you to be able to perform at the capability that you expected to. The other, I think, kind of collaboration that needs to happen is between not just not-for-profits, but also training providers that are skilled with people that are experts in people that are differently abled or come from, being excluded through the world of work for whatever reason, but how do we incorporate those individuals into an inclusive development talent journey that's bespoke to their capabilities for the roles that they're going to go into.
Fantastic, thank you. That's great. Coming back to you, Adam, I wanted to look at it from the perspective of academies, so and also leadership gaps. The strategy does talk to a lot about to closing leadership gaps and the need for that to happen. And I'd like to know from you, how can the sector strengthen leadership pipelines to sustain experience in that from a constituency perspective?
Yeah, a few years ago, 6 years ago now, I took on my new role within the company, and part of it was to address that gap that we had in leadership. We were going through exponential growth, growing so quickly, but we really needed to grow the talent. And that was how we came up with the idea of a leadership acceleration program, which talks to many aspects of the strategy. The Leadership Acceleration Program was really born from our CEO at the time and still sponsored today by Jason Locke. And it really comes from a passionate vision of theirs to make sure that our South African leadership teams are reflective of South Africans. And that really needed a big investment. We have some of the best talent across the board, and we're very fortunate to have that. And they are on the cusp of making something great. So we've really been trying to nurture that journey for our people. And to date, we've taken 90 leaders through at a middle manager to senior manager level.
Through their program?
Through the program. Yeah. It's an 18-month blended program. It talks to many of the things that Lazelle's talking about. It has personal mastery, but underpinned with a really strong academic curriculum through Stellenbosch Executive Education. So we've thrown in this whole package. I think what makes the whole piece quite unique, though, and it's this whole notion, which I think we're all starting to talk about, which is leaders develop leaders.
Yeah.
And in this country in particular, we have an obligation to do that, Yes. So I think that's some of the successes we've had in our company is really just matching our culture, which is really about championing our people and making sure that every leader in our business is taking accountability of raising the next generation of leaders.
So mentoring them.
Totally. It comes through formal mentoring relationships. And that's not just with people in South Africa, that's global relationships that we've been able to create for people within specialized skill sets or job families within that process. So it's been a huge success for us in terms of closing this gap. But absolutely, we're now looking to see how we can partner up and make it more from the sector.
Brilliant. No, thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us. Andy, I'm going to come back to you for a kind of a final comment. Given the scale of the task, I mean, as I mentioned, the strategy has 167 pages, everybody, with, I think, probably over 100 action items in it. I just showed you 4 on each of those 12 areas today, but there's a lot more action items in the actual strategy. So if you've downloaded it, you'll see what I mean. There's a lot there, right? And the task is quite huge in front of us. But what are those quick early wins that one can, that BPESA can prioritize to build momentum and also confidence across the ecosystem?
Thanks, Mark. And I'll respond with a bit of a call to action as well, if I may. So the first call to action will be for everybody to access the research report and the strategy. It's a very rich body of work. And as expert as everybody is in the room and those who couldn't attend, there's a lot to be gained by reading that research and identifying where the changes are, what the needs are, taking the guidance and continuing to engage with each other, like you can hear from my colleagues on the panel. And you all have such an appreciation for what needs to be done from a skills development point of view, but use the resources that have been provided you to give you guidance and help you accelerate your journey in developing skills. That's the first practical call to action. I think from a sector point of view, there are so many things, but looking at the strategy and how you've structured it into short, medium, and long term, I'd suggest these are the following things. The first is all organizations can move, like Judy said earlier, to align their current curricula to the relevant skills frameworks. Make sure that what you're doing is relevant to where we are and where we're going. You can do that on your own. You can get guidance, and these are communicated skills frameworks like the Sophia Skills Framework, which there was a workshop on that yesterday. That's a starting point. You can do it on your own. The second is to make sure that these academies that are addressing vertical specialization and skills or work readiness, that those academies, you can pilot those, you can replicate those, you can start using those academies, and also leverage the resources and the activities that others are busy with. So as you'll know, and I'll speak from our relationship as the Collective X with BPESA, there's a lot of synergy between what we are doing within a broader ecosystem and what BPESA is doing. We should be working together to capitalize on those synergies right now because they're in front of us. The industry needs to continue to demonstrate demand-led models. That's the core of the strategy, right? And so people want to see what do these look like in action. And, you know, there are many role players who can show you what those look like and let others see and practice that themselves. Then, as a collective, to boost visibility of what you're doing, to share what you're learning. There's a tremendous spirit of sharing in the sector in South Africa. To capture the data, the insights, the lessons learned. And I know BPESA plans to implement a Skills Intelligence Hub, which will be a tremendous resource so that you can get going with that and talk and share and help each other accelerate their path to where they need to get you on this journey. Engage in the webinars, give recognition where you track progress, communicate it, let everybody see how the strategy is unfolding, even in its early days. And then lastly, just the importance of getting quick wins out there because they build trust and confidence, and that also creates an attraction for funders, investors, other role players. And so taking those few things that industry can do, the few things that BPESA can control, and doing them well, and soon will give those proof points that will build trust that this is a strategy that's relevant, that's effective, and is going to fulfill its objectives.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you for that summation. So I think what I also take from that, and just also being part of the team that architected the strategy, is that there's a lot of action items in there. Some of them can be implemented within short-term, long-term, medium-term, and long-term. Some of them are best practice that can be action items that can be adopted. But the key that I take from what you just said is that, you know, even if we can just implement some of those quick wins and get those going, that's going to have a good and direct impact on the skills development of the sector. So thank you for that summation. And that's it. Thank you very much. I just want to say thank you to the panelists for joining. Judy, thank you for joining us. Thank you, Liza. Thank you. Thanks very much, Adam. Thank you. Andy as well. Thank you.